What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here, and today we are going to be discussing the Age of Triumph, the last content addition for Destiny, the last substantial update for Destiny. The next thing on the horizon truly just is Destiny 2, and so it's time to talk about, in detail, the Age of Triumph. Talk about what it did right, what it did wrong, and most importantly, was the Age of Triumph a fitting end for Destiny? So, let's get started. And we're going to start with probably the main feature for most people about the Age of Triumph. Certainly the thing that energized the player base the most. The thing that got a lot of new players very excited and a lot of old players to come back to the game. And that is the updated raids. Now, very interestingly, this is not a new idea. In fact, the community has been asking for raids to be updated back in 2014. Specifically with the launch of the Dark Below in December 2014. At that time, the level was increased, and the only way you could get to the max level was to do the new, at the time, Crota's End raid. The Vault of Glass became rather irrelevant because it only got you up to 2 levels before the max light level. So already at that time, in 2014, we had a large portion of the community asking for raids to be updated. And that continued and continued and continued for the next 3 years, with the one exception being the launch of the House of Wolves. It introduced something called Etheric Light, which lets you upgrade any gear to the relevant, well, at that time, for weapons, it was the relevant attack value. That was before light levels were actually even introduced, per se. So it's been a very interesting history with the old raids and raids being made irrelevant and raids changing through the years, and so finally, we have access to all 4 raids. All 4 raids have been made very relevant. So, did it work? Was it a good idea? And I think overwhelmingly the player base agrees that, yeah, it certainly was. Being able to play all 4 of these raids in an updated fashion and get relevant loot is fantastic. And I think people may misunderstand how big of a deal this is for so many players. And that's because people buy Destiny every single day. Every day, it's someone's first ever time playing Destiny. Every day, you have people trying the Nightfall for the first time, people attempting a raid for the first ever time. And for a lot of these people, especially people who purchased Destiny back with the Rise of Iron, there was really only one relevant raid, which was the Wrath of the Machine. And for many people, it was difficult enough to find a group for the one relevant raid, let alone the older, irrelevant raids. Finding a group for King's Fall, finding a group for the Vault of Glass was a pretty difficult thing to do for many players. And so many players, even though those raids were in the game, they never got a chance to do them. But with the Age of Triumph making all these raids relevant again and increasing the players' interest in doing all of these raids to get the, quote-unquote new and updated loot, so many players are playing these raids for the first ever time. Essentially, for a lot of players, again, you've added 3 new raids, which I think is just fantastic. It's also, again, given older players, people who have left Destiny maybe a long time ago, reason to come back and earn their great loot again. They were not thrilled with the loot they've had at the time not being usable. They wanted to use that Vault of Glass, that Crota's End gear, and now they have the chance to do it again. So I think updating the raids was just fantastic. Also, adding the elemental primaries via exotics. I think this was actually a very intelligent way of adding back elemental primaries. I know some people are not thrilled by this. Some people think that it's essentially just a reskin. But essentially what you had with the Taken King was Bungie moving away from the idea of elemental primaries. They thought that people were just using only elemental primaries, which honestly kind of was the case, and it was stifling diversity. You had a small subsection of guns that were actually seeing play in PvE, and you had a massive amount of guns that were never touched, and so eliminating elemental primaries was a way to really mix things up. And then you had this problem. How do we reintroduce the old loot? How do we keep the focus of the old loot, which many of them, like, they just wouldn't be the same without their respective elements, while still keeping to this new philosophy of diversification? Now, whether or not you like this philosophy, like, some people are gonna say, I disagree, elemental primaries did, diversify the playing field a decent amount, like, I don't agree that Bungie did this, and that's totally fine. But Bungie made this decision, and it was in the game, and they had to solve it, essentially, some way. And so introducing the elemental primaries as exotics is definitely a way to solve it. You're not necessarily stifling diversity that much, because giving up your exotic slot is quite the steep payoff. And so I think this was actually, for solving this problem, this was a very good way to do it. You reintroduce these weapons, both in the legendary and the exotic versions. You have the elemental primaries that people know and love, and you have them balanced and usable in this new environment. And so again, that was pretty good. Also, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the raid armor and the new raid ornaments. These look fantastic. I think most people would agree on that. Now also, it's very interesting that the armor seems to be a lot harder to get. You go through an entire raid and you get 1, maybe 2 armor pieces. Now some people are not thrilled about this, and even myself, I've noticed that, the drop rate doesn't really need to be that low. It seems pretty damn low. At the same time, it does also make sense. If the weapons are pretty easily accessible, which they seem to be, especially the exotic ones, then something needs to be in the game to make you go and replay these raids, and I think armor is definitely a way to do that. If you played through the Vault of Glass and in 1 week were able to get all of the armor pieces you want for basically all your characters and all the weapons, your motivation to play the next time that is the weekly featured raid is going to be much lower. And so having that kind of elusive gear in the sense of armor is definitely a motivating factor to keep people going back every single week. And something like armor, it looks damn cool, but you can definitely live without it. It's not essential. So I'm actually not super upset that they did this. I'm kind of glad they made armor a little bit hard to get, giving us that reason to grind. So I think that's actually kind of a good thing if you look at it from that perspective. Now, I want to mention also, I think it's very important to mention that the introduction of these featured weekly raids and all of this stuff, the reintroduction of the loot, I think overall has been a great positive thing for Destiny. I think a lot of players are very happy with the fact that Bungie did this. And funny enough, as I mentioned earlier, these ideas have been around, even a featured weekly raid, that idea has been around for years. And there's always been naysayers. People saying, well, how are you going to reintroduce the raids? What are you going to do with the elemental primaries? You can't reintroduce Kuroda's End because the Black Hammer is overpowered. Well, Bungie just didn't have it in the loot table. Like, problem solved. So as a community, we need to be aware of this. I always see the Destiny naysayers that just because they can't think of a solution, they assume that there's no solution out there. And they're frankly, if they were listened to, preventing a lot of fun and advancements from being made in Destiny. Again, there was people advocating against updating these raids, but now that that's been done, we can see how wrong those people are. Again, just because they couldn't think of a solution for the Black Hammer. So they thought there was no solution. Anytime there's a great idea about introducing SMGs as a primary, or introducing, a different new way to do armor, you always have people saying, no, I don't think it can be done, so therefore it can't be done. And I'm very glad Bungie is not listening to these people. But moving on, the Age of Triumph had a lot more than just the updated raids, although that was certainly the main feature. It also had updated activities. These, however, there was definitely some good additions, making Prison of Elders a little bit more relevant again, making the story missions relevant. I actually really like the new updated story mission playlist, where you have the modifiers introduced, where you have better rewards. I think that's all great stuff. However, there's definitely some problems. The Prison of Elders, even though it's updated, I very rarely see people actually doing it. And I think the reason being is because there's really no desirable loot that you want to go out and get. Just the loot table right now isn't that great. And I think they could have sorely used some updated raid loot. Why not go back and update some of the year one Prison of Elders loot. Make that drop at the new light levels. Is there a Prison of Elders loot that is from year 1 that's somehow crazily overpowered that I don't know about? Because I seriously don't think so. I wish Bungie would have added to that loot table and given that extra piece of desire to go and earn those pieces of loot. The reason people are so drawn to the updated raids are because of those new and updated pieces of loot. And the story missions, apart from them being, again, I like that idea, but they sorely need matchmaking. Right? Like, I really couldn't believe that the story missions don't have matchmaking. It seems like such a no-brainer as another activity to do rather than just do strikes and strikes and strikes. So I think Bungie dropped the ball on that as well. Moving on to the record book. Now, the record book is actually, I think, overall a positive thing. It gives a lot of pretty cool goals for people to work towards. Firstly, a lot of people are going to try to unlock that shirt. And then after that, a lot more people are going to try to get to 100% completion. Especially like the absolute OG players have been playing, you know, in my case since the alpha, in other people's cases since the beta or since launch. They have the opportunity to 100% that book, which is a very cool goal. However, the main complaint about this book that I keep seeing over and over again is, what's the point? Right? What's the point of updating this book? What's the point of getting all of these different emblems if they all disappear with Destiny 2? And that is a very fair point. However, the counterpoint would simply be, well, what's the point of doing anything in video games? Like, it all goes away once the sequel comes out or once you stop playing or whatever, right? The point of doing it is to have fun and get that reward for the time you're actually playing. Live in the now, essentially. But I really hope that there's kind of a mesh between these two perspectives for Destiny 2. I really hope Bungie actually introduces emblems, shaders, or whatever sort of customizable features they have in Destiny 2 and relates those to this record book. If you get the emblem for completing all of the different story missions in the original Destiny, right? That 7 out of 7 emblem that you get, you damn well should get the Destiny 2 equivalent to that. And the same works for a lot of other features of the record book. If you get the entire page done for the Hunter, you should get a specific emblem in Destiny, which of course you already do, but also get a specific emblem in Destiny 2. I'm going to be really, really disappointed, extremely disappointed, if I start up Destiny 2 and all I get is like one emblem saying, hey, you played Destiny, good for you. That, I think, would be extremely poor, and I really hope Bungie has these matching emblems that work for what we actually achieved in Destiny. Now, the reason the emblems can't transfer directly is because emblems that we know right now may not be in Destiny 2. They may be reworking entirely how emblems work. Perhaps you have a background and then a picture, so that's essentially 2 in 1. But again, I hope Bungie introduces something to represent what we've done with this record book. I think failure to do so will be, frankly, a failure to honor the accomplishments of the Destiny community. But moving on from the record book, we also have what I want to talk about, PvP bounties. These were introduced via the Crucible Quartermaster, and I think these are a really great addition to the game. You do these certain PvP bounties, get 50 kills with hand cannons, and then when you complete that bounty, the hand cannon that you get can be from a variety of different activities. You can get old Year 2 Iron Banner weapons, and I've gotten a few. I got a Covalence's Duty with a pretty decent roll. I was very happy about that. You can get old Trials of Osiris loot. You can get all of this different stuff, and I think that's a great idea. That is such a good idea. Getting all of these old weapons, again, like the Year 2 Iron Banner stuff, which you have no way of getting right now. You cannot get the Covalence's Duty any other way. So that was a great way to reintroduce that loot. Again, there's no reason for that loot to not be accessible. It's not overpowered in any sense of the word. It's just inaccessible. And I wish Bungie did this more often. I wish it did this for some of the old faction weapons. Why can't it do that for some of the old, Year 1 weapons that still aren't reintroduced into Year 2? I love that idea, is having these weapons that, the game evolves. So of course you're going to have new Iron Banner weapons replacing the old ones, but still giving a certain way to have the old ones accessible. I think, seriously, those PvP bounties are how bounties should be done going forward into Destiny 2. I really hope there are these exclusive bounties in Destiny 2 that drop these weapons so you can constantly keep these weapons accessible. You can move forward and evolve with these certain playlists. You can change the weapons available in the Crucible, in the Iron Banner, for the different factions, but you don't have to just relegate these old weapons to, the emptiness of Destiny space and time, to the void, essentially. You still have a chance to get them and to earn them and to use them. That is such a good idea, and I very much applaud Bungie for doing that. I wish they did even more of it, is my one complaint. But moving on from there is definitely two more complaints. Number one, vault space. I can't not mention this. People were having issues with vault space before the Age of Triumph. So after the Age of Triumph with all of this new loot, it's even worse. And this may not seem like a big deal to some players who keep their vault secure, but if you're a player who has been around for as long as I have, you'll know that you're probably holding on to year one Trials of Osiris weapons, year one Iron Banner weapons, year one just weapons and armor that are completely, well, not armor anymore actually because of the Silver Dust engrams, but the weapons that are inaccessible through any other means. I cannot get another messenger. I have the year one Trials of Osiris pulse rifle, the messenger, fantastic gun, still good in the Crucible today. But if I delete that, I am never, ever, ever getting it back. And that's what year two players, they just don't understand. How is your vault full? How my vault isn't full, it's because I've got quite literally irreplaceable gear that obviously I don't want to delete. And so it is kind of messed up that because Bungie didn't introduce more vault space, it is punishing its most loyal, most dedicated players. The players that have been playing for so long, they have loot that has become inaccessible at this point. Those are the players who are most hurt by not having vault space. Again, the most dedicated players, which is pretty messed up. Honestly, you're hurting your most loyal fan base. And so I really, really wish Bungie does something with vault space. It's not the end of the world, I don't think. There's enough vault space that you can still certainly do a lot of things, but it is going to stifle a lot of players. It's going to hurt a lot of players have those end game goals. Like if your goal right now is to collect a bunch of different armor, I'm going to go and I'm going to collect all of the armor sets I can before Destiny 2 drops. That is a totally reasonable goal to have. That is a totally reasonable thing to keep your time busy until Destiny 2 launches. But you're going to find if you try to do that you will literally run out of vault space. And once you find that out, how high is your motivation going to be? It's not going to be that high. So that is certainly an issue. The other issue that a lot of people have, I see this comment a lot with the Age of Triumph, is that this update didn't introduce anything that we didn't have before, and many players were quite upset by this, wanted some new content to end off Destiny. And I feel ya. That's totally fair. That's a very fair argument to have, that I've been playing Destiny for so long, maybe I've done all the raids, I don't care about these updated raids. I don't care, I've done it all, I've gotten all the loot. Where is something new for me to utilize? Where's something new for me to play with and to experience? And that isn't there in the Age of Triumph. However, I feel that argument may be kind of missing the point in the Age of Triumph, is because the Age of Triumph, to me, feels like it's a best hits album. It's a greatest hits album, right? If you have the greatest hits for Aerosmith, you're not going to have any new songs. You're not going to have any new content because it's a greatest hits. It goes over what they've done, and maybe it remasters some stuff, but it doesn't introduce anything new. The Age of Triumph is Destiny's greatest hits. It's got all the raids. It's got all the raid loot. It's got the activities updated. It's got ways to get, old Iron Banner stuff and other great weapons. It's got all that, but it doesn't necessarily have anything particularly new. And I think for many players, they're okay with that. Even for me, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having a Destiny greatest hits ending off Destiny. In fact, that feels like the most appropriate way to end off Destiny, to be honest, is with the greatest hits remastered volume, essentially, of Destiny. And so there you have it. I think that that's really not that horrible of a thing. I would have liked some new weapons, don't get me wrong. If I had my choice, I would have said, yeah, new weapons. Let's reintroduce even some year one weapons, which are basically new because they're so inaccessible at this point. But I'm not truly upset that there's nothing new because of, what I've explained. So is the Age of Triumph like the fitting end? Is it the fitting way Destiny will end? I think a lot of people would say, yep, Destiny ends with a bunch of reskins. I think that's probably the most appropriate way for Destiny to end. But in all seriousness, I think that, yes, the Age of Triumph, I think, is a great way for Destiny to end. All the raids are relevant. All of the activities are relevant. It's easy to achieve 400, and so that does mean it's easy to start collecting. You can get into the end game, and there is an end game in Destiny. It's certainly lacking. Like, don't get me wrong, the end game in Destiny has to be improved for Destiny 2. That's a whole nother topic, but it's nice that players who maybe don't play as much, the more casual players, the players who are still buying Destiny, can get to 400 Light, can start getting those end game rewards in the sense that they're going for those, top tier best roll armor pieces. They're going for those god roll weapons, for PvP, and they're going for those raid weapons and raid armor, and they're just building their arsenal to the best it can be before it's all taken away for Destiny 2. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's kind of depressing, but I think it's fine. I want to be as geared up as possible. The day before Destiny 2 goes live, I'm going to be the most ballin' guardian in the tower because you know what? I'm going to stop that Cabal invasion by myself. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, this look at the Age of Triumph, talking about what it did right, what it did wrong, and how these lessons, I think, can be transferred into Destiny 2, because I think there's a lot of questions that remain by what the Age of Triumph did for Destiny 2. Is there going to be featured raids in Destiny 2? We know Destiny 2 is probably going to come with one raid right off the bat. That's almost a guaranteed. But what happens when the second raid is introduced? Will the first one fall into obscurity again, and then 3 years later they'll finally make it relevant? Or will they start doing a featured raid playlist right away? Or will they let the new raid be the most relevant raid for a couple of months and then switch it up? It'll be very interesting to see what Bungie does, because I think the community reception from these featured weekly raids has been great, and people are saying, Bungie, keep doing this. We want raids to be relevant. We don't want them to fall into obscurity. So that's going to be a very interesting topic in the years to come, and in the games to come as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video again, found it interesting. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.